listening to the RMPodcast, the official podcast of Red Moon Productions. Here are your hosts, Brandon Davidson, Keith Cheatham, and Sean Sebastian. Enjoy.
Welcome to another episode of the... Well,
had the cough.
Somebody's got the COVID over there. Oh, man, I'm telling you. No, nobody's got COVID.
I got phlegm.
We're in the clear here.
No, that was what, 2 or 3
quarantine.
weeks ago? I don't remember when I was on here with the cough drops.
I'm telling you, we're going from summer into fall. Still got all that nastiness, the crud. I'm one of your hosts, Brandon Davidson, alongside our normal new host,
Sean Sebastian.
And
Crud.
The Crud. That's right, tune in every single week right here on all your favorite social media networks. Live every Tuesday night, the Red Moon Podcast. We thank you all for tuning in. We got a good show tonight planned for you. Running a little behind on setting up everything.
Hey, we made it. Everything's good.
We're good.
It's been been
good.
an interesting week.
But we had
a nice night. It was a very nice night.
Yes.
Good kickoff to the NFL season.
That was fun.
That was all good
Great
this
weekend.
past week. Yeah,
I think it all culminated. Like we had a great opening from Thursday to Monday with football, and then tonight we had a really nice night.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think it just
Good food.
This is probably one of the better starts to a week I've had in a long time.
There you go. Oh, well, you know what? And it's starting to finally feel like fall out there.
Yes.
At least here in Louisville.
Yes.
Football weather.
Football weather. That's right.
Camping weather is what I
Ooh,
like.
there
Yep.
you go. I like that. That's right.
Get yourself in a tent.
You know, we have some. It's not really breaking news because we're not breaking it. It's kind of been out in the open for a while.
It's broken news.
We're not airing on Charter, but Disney is. They're back on Charter Spectrum. They made a deal just before last night's
Basically,
Monday Night
just
Football.
the essentials, though.
Yeah.
That's what I found funny. So I guess Disney caved because Spectrum no longer is carrying, what was it, Freeform,
Well, I don't
Disney
know that
XD, FXXX.
Disney cave. Basically, they said, "Okay, we'll accept the money you're going to offer us, but you're not getting all these channels." So,
But that's them caving in my mind, because before it used to be them holding hostage, saying, "No, if you want this channel, you have to take these others."
that's true.
Because
that's
it's
true.
worse on their end.
They gave them Disney and the sports channels, but then like the special Disney channels like Disney XD, I think like Disney
Look,
Junior, like
it's-
all the
Freeform,
Freeform.
FX, or
well, not
FXX.
FXX and FXM.
Yeah, Disney Junior.
Yep.
Nat Geo.
Yeah. Because here's
So
the
like
thing.
let them keep the basic channels.
The big
but-
dark secret that everybody knows with cable is the reason you don't get a la carte cable is because all of these channels are owned by big corporate overlords.
like Disney or
and
Paramount
they
or
pretty much
NBC.
strike up a deal with a streamer of any kind, whether it's YouTube TV nowadays. I mean, these streaming cable services were not a thing 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Nope.
So you have, Sling TV even. Like, you've got all these different variations. And what it would be is they'd come in and say, no, these are our premium channels, but you have to support the rest of these. And it was a way of them burying the numbers for probably smaller networks that weren't doing so great, or they wouldn't have the large amount of their traffic. But of course, they still bring in ad money. They gotta charge money for ads on those stations and those networks. But now all of a sudden it's like, if you don't include those and we get closer to the a la carte format, you're going to see cable networks folding into, well, nobody's watching this. We're not going to include it. Nobody even wants it. Well, that turns into problems for these big corporate overlords who have all these channels that they want to cram into one package.
Yeah, because Spectrum, their main concern obviously was the sports. People were pissed that they couldn't watch football opening weekend, and they got those channels, and that is going to be the biggest part of what people were wanting back. So, yeah, it's like, I think, like you said, Spectrum won out more so than Disney did. Disney had to say, well, I guess we'll just give you this and take what we can get because we're too broke to argue.
Pretty much. Well,
I mean,
and I think
Disney's
they were
not
both eating the
broke, but
coast.
they're not doing well.
They're hemorrhaging.
Yeah.
They're absolutely in no way, shape, or form able to hold the line on certain things like this, where they might have been able to just a few years ago. Ultimately, too, I think Spectrum lost out. I know they were losing money in terms of having to They had already said, I think, I spoke to one Spectrum customer, they were giving $15 rebates.
Oh, they had to,
And they were doing it on a month-to-month basis based on how long it would go, the blackout would go. And I think Spectrum kind of is, look, that's who our cable provider here is in this area. Charter's the bigger company.
But they only gave the credit if you called and requested it.
Well, of course.
It wasn't automatic. So that's how they were able to get.
They always do that.
Because a lot of people aren't going to think to call or not going to remember to call or don't care.
They do the same with internet outages.
Oh, yeah.
They offer a rebate for internet outages, but you have to call. If it's over a certain period of time.
Willingly give you money back or give you a credit.
Well, why not? If you're not going to ask for it, why would they? Exactly. But I do find it funny that it happened right before Monday Night Football, before the
Jets game.
The Jets and the Rodgers is out for the season. Their big $55 million.
We have grins on our faces because we're both Packers fans. Not that we wanted Rodgers to get injured. I never would want that. But still,
I didn't want him hurt. But I have absolutely wanted to see him do bad.
All the drama, it was kind of like, well, grass isn't always greener.
Sometimes it's slippery.
Sometimes it's turf. So I mean,
it's not grass at all.
It's not grass at all.
But no, we do have a great show. Obviously, we wanted to come out with that news right off the top there for all of the viewers.
Rodgers got injured.
No.
I know the Spectrum
news.
Yeah.
But it is funny because this part of this back and forth is what helped even my family migrate. Look, we're cord cutters for the most part. The only time we really want cable is, and I think like most people, during football and basketball season. But we found a way to go around it not go around it. It's part of their deal. But we subscribe to YouTube TV, and they offer family packages where you can put 3 users on there. And it's worked out for us. You can only have 3 streaming at a time, but for the most part, that's my whole family's not watching every single game. So it actually ended up being a bright spot for, I think, us to give other people more options. And I think this was the tricky area that both Disney and I think Spectrum, the uncharted territory that they were going into. Spectrum more so because they don't want to lose subscribers in the dying world of cable. But then I think also in the sense of Disney's, situation, they don't have the resources.
Disney owns ESPN and Hulu, so it works for them too if they can drive people away from a cable place to go with something like Hulu Live TV, which is what I have. Not because of what happened with the blackout. I haven't had cable since I moved into my house 5 years ago. I just never cared for it. I didn't need cable because I didn't watch things live. So, but my parents who had Dish, and it was just a ridiculous cost, were just looking for something cheaper that had, because they didn't need a whole bunch of channels that they weren't watching. They just wanted to make sure they had the specific ones they wanted, something cheaper. And because I already had like the Disney, Hulu, ESPN bundle, I was like, well, you can bundle the Hulu Live with that, and we can work with that. Downside to the Hulu versus the YouTube, granted, I don't know if it's because y'all have the family plan or not, but Hulu only offers 2 live streams. But because the only people using it are me and my parents, like that's not it's not been a problem either.
YouTube offers 3. I think it's up to 4 that can subscribe to a family plan, 4 separate people, but only 3 streams going at one time. So we're just each chipping in, paying my brother who's got the account, the account holder.
But I think cable, I think, is just dying.
It is. Well, and I think Spectrum, if there's anything about this whole deal, I think Spectrum sees the writing on the wall. They're getting tired of paying ridiculous rates that continually go up after each negotiation period, and they lock it in, the deal in for a certain amount of years, and then of course it comes back around. This is known in the TV biz. I work for a TV station, and whether it's Dish, Direct, or Spectrum, there's always these deals with different cable channels that come around, and they're always constantly trying to figure out ways in which they can nickel and dime, to get on. I mean, heck, we pay. I think we get paid by cable because of us being an over-the-air station, because we're a class. I think they're divided into classes, but they actually pay us to carry our signal because we're local TV and we're provided free over the air. But any other subscription service, they have to pay. That's why if you look at your cable bill, you'll have like $20, $23
for local channels.
Channels, which it is ridiculous that you have to pay for that. But if you don't have cable, just get an antenna and you can get it for free. which is great for NFL.
But
when it comes to NCAA or other games that are college ball, you have SEC, ACC Network, ESPN. There's other channels that you don't get included that you would need a cable subscription for.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. It's like everybody sees the sign, the writing on the wall. Cable's dying. It's dying out quick, and I think they're trying to hold out. They're trying to maybe pull in one last little. I don't want to say it's totally for the consumers, but I think it's a way for Spectrum to save money and also say, hey, look, we're lobbying to make sure that maybe a la carte is down the road because there are these channels that nobody wants and nobody's watching.
And great. I mean, I know it was, like you said, a different world with, commercials and advertising and all that, but and granted, like you said, also with the big companies owning so many channels that they wanted to make sure, well, you can't have this one channel unless you take them all. But a la carte always, I think, made more sense for a customer when, like, you got 300 channels, but you're only watching 5 of them. So,
Right.
like, why do you want to pay this astronomical price for something you're only using, like, 95% of? So,
Right. And because at the end of the day, even if you want to say, well, those other smaller channels that don't get a lot of traffic, it's like, we'll give a deal to a customer and maybe add on the channel for $1-2 a month, and you'll get more subscribers. And it's like, yeah, but there's also still going to be channels that nobody subscribes to, and you almost have to ask, well, then, yeah, what's the point of it? And that's kind of the whole point is, why should every consumer be suckered in to, helping fulfill or line the pockets of some executive that is running a channel that nobody even tunes into or wants or watches? I mean, at the end of the day, the most consumer-centric method would be a la carte if you could. And then we would see a ton of channels just go away overnight because I guarantee you they wouldn't have enough subscribers to meet the cost of saying, yeah, this is worth keeping up.
Maybe they should make better content. I don't know.
Or maybe there's just too much content.
There's too much. There's too much garbage out there.
Which we're going to talk about that too tonight. Obviously, it's like a topic of discussion every week on the Red Moon Podcast.
But we do have a review we can get into.
We do. We have one that's a little bit late this year.
Yeah, My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3.
That's it.
Yes.
We thought about doing Equalizer. We said no.
I'm kind of curious if My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3 might have been a better choice. I don't know.
No, this movie was like we'll get into it after the review, but it wasn't that bad.
It's one that we were gonna review back when it came out. We ended up not because it hit right smack dab in the middle of like Barbenheimer season, and then the slew of movies that came out then. You had Mission Impossible, you had Transformers before that. There were just the bigger blockbuster movies that came out that we decided to take a stab at. So we wanted to circle back. It stinks because I am hearing good things about the Equalizer, and I almost really do want to watch that series.
I would need to watch all of them. Yeah.
And it's like I
the first 2 aren't bad.
See, and I want to watch those, and then I wouldn't mind going to see 3. I've heard good things about it, and I'd like to see it. So maybe I don't know, some road, some way down the future, maybe. But tonight we've got Asteroid City, Wes Anderson's flick that came out back in June.
Yeah,
we're revisiting it because hey, we needed a week off from the theater, and that was available, so we decided to check it out.
My Big Fat Greek Wedding
or The Nun 2, which did hit #1 at the box office.
I'm not surprised at all.
People love their horror films.
The first one was terrible.
And it was #1 when it came out.
Oh, I know.
So it's like
Saw will be, I'm sure, make plenty of money, but it's still not going to be good.
So yeah, I'm with you there. I'm not holding out high hopes for that. Alrighty, guys, let's get into it. Then here is none other our review of Wes Anderson's latest movie from the summer, Asteroid City.
Amongst the creative directors still in Hollywood, there are a few we fall back on time and time again, as favorites who still create original and unique movies. They may not always get it right. Scorsese, Nolan, Tarantino are all directors whose general body of work we love, but have all produced their share of duds. With this year being such an eclectic hodgepodge of genuinely great and entertaining films scattered amongst the culmination of the most generic and poorly crafted garbage to come from Hollywood, it's that much sadder when such a creative director produces a film that's just not up to their usual standards. And so I feel it is the case with Wes Anderson's latest film, Asteroid City. With a large ensemble cast of returning actors and newcomers alike, as per the typical Wes Anderson film, Asteroid City is similarly to The French Dispatch, a narrative within a narrative. Taking the form of a play framed inside of a behind-the-scenes documentary showing the play's creation, the main narrative being the play focuses primarily on the character of Augie Steenbeck, a war photographer in the play's narrative, portrayed in the movie by Jason Schwartzman. His son Woodrow, played by Jake Ryan, Midge Campbell, a famous actress within the play's narrative, played by Scarlett Johansson, and her daughter Dinah, played by Grace Edwards. Each actor, however, fulfills two roles, that of their character in the play, and the actor who plays them in the narrative frame of the documentary. The rest of the film is filled out with unique and quirky characters inhabiting the 1950s site of a meteorite crash not far from an atomic bomb testing site. Asteroid City, from a production standpoint, is exactly everything I have come to love from Wes Anderson. It's quirky and uniquely from the start recognizable as a movie made by Wes Anderson, yet at the same time different from anything he's done before, in production design and cinematography at least. Fast-paced, even for an Anderson film, the movie never felt rushed, and at a runtime short of 2 hours, the film is short, but maintained my attention and never felt lacking for additional screen time. The cast delivers solid performances, with Schwartzman and Johansson both giving performances that sat just on the cusp of eliciting emotion that never quite hit me, though I felt that was more due to the film's story than their acting. Steve Carell, as a new player to Anderson's work, gives a performance both different and yet still complementing Anderson's typical style of humor. But knowing he came on as a replacement for Bill Murray, I couldn't help but imagine Murray delivering a much funnier, drier performance. Jeffrey Wright, who starred in The French Dispatch, returns, and while his dialogue I think sometimes failed the character, he stood out to me as someone I definitely hope continues working with Anderson. Overall, the elephant in the room, however, is Asteroid City's script. For all intents and purposes, Asteroid City, from production to performances, is exactly what you expect from Anderson. But where it lost me was the script. The narrative within a narrative is done well, but comes right after Anderson's last movie, The French Dispatch, which not only does something similar, but much more creatively. The story in Asteroid City is a look into not just the unknown, but into the meaning of why we are here, what our life's journey is about. This is highlighted differently in different characters, and sometimes the story and a character has something interesting to say on the matter, with a few scenes closer to the film's end involving Schwartzman's character in the documentary segment delivering perhaps the most well-crafted emotional pull of the movie. Ultimately, though, a lot of the story and themes ring hollow as the story falls back on the tried-and-true Hollywood trope of the journey is what matters most, and that meaning and fulfillment in life can never be truly found. What matters is ourselves and who we try to find fulfillment in life with. And while the movie is a bit more hopeful than how I've summarized it, that is basically what things boil down to. It's a bland cop-out Hollywood is constantly guilty of, and with the lack of truly inspiring and relatable characters, less than clever dialogue from Anderson, and a theme that's generic and pointless, Asteroid City just isn't Anderson's best or most creative endeavor. It certainly entertains, and is humorous and full of charm, but the charm wears thin once the story gets lost in its pessimism disguised as hope. It's worth a watch if you are a diehard Anderson fan, but it certainly won't be remembered amongst his greater films. I give Asteroid City 2.5 out of 4 stars.
Okay.
There you go.
I think that's the lowest score I've given a Wes Anderson film, and it's not, even 2.5 is not terrible, but I'm just like, it just didn't, out of all the movies he's had the last several years, I would say, I think I mentioned this to you, from Moonrise Kingdom on, like, I've really enjoyed each movie he's come out with, and I felt like this one, like, it offered nothing new from any of those movies as far as, like, story and characters go, the quirkiness. It's like, I almost felt like there was bits of each of those movies in this. There was bits of Moonrise Kingdom, bits of Grand Budapest, bits of The French Dispatch. Yeah. And I was like, it's not that, like, I hate that, but I just felt like it wasn't as creative as what Wes Anderson has done in the past.
Yeah, I think that's the main issue that I had with the movie was it did seem like a jumbled, I don't want to say a mess, even though I did feel like some of the themes were kind of all over the place, but I felt like it was a jumbled bunch of stuff that he's already done. Because I actually saw different things that reminded me of the Royal Tenenbaums too. And it was just, I don't know, it was like this isn't different. All of those other films that he's done are extremely different from one another, even though he uses some of the same actors. And even though some of their roles are kind of similar,
and the humor
I felt like the humor is dry and monotone and the same. But I felt like they all were unique, and this movie just wasn't as unique, other than the set pieces.
Yeah,
I thought the set pieces and the production design were extremely unique compared to some of his other stuff. But I mean, ultimately, it took me 2 times to watch the movie. I sat through about an hour of it and was just like bored out of my gourd, and then I revisited it and finished it, and I was just I was at 1.5.
Oh wow!
I was like, this is my least favorite Wes Anderson movie.
Wow!
And I
agree,
hated
it's my least favorite.
I hated Moonrise Kingdom, but I actually liked it better than this.
Wow. Okay.
So
no, I think I'm right in there between you two.
Yeah.
I think I erred on maybe 2.5. But I may drop it down to 2, only because it is one of those I definitely see myself not revisiting.
No, yeah.
No. I don't know. It was. I can't say I hated it. I thought the pacing was good. I did think that throughout I was thoroughly engaged with what was going to happen next. But the problem was the payoff wasn't there.
Nope.
There was just never a moment of happy-go-lucky, feel good. And look, not everything has to be, but when you're essential theme of throughout the movie is these kids who lost their parent, and yet it's kind of doom and gloom, but also then you have this whole Asteroid City event where people are showing up in the
just
town
trying to find out the meaning of life,
right,
and the unknown, and I'm like,
and then even with the whole alien aspect of them all being blown away. And then yet it's comical. It's hilarious.
Yeah, I love the alien.
The alien
that's the one
is
thing
funny.
I think he nailed.
But and that's the thing. There's so many quirks again that you expect from Wes Anderson that are in this film that he gets right, totally right. The overpass that goes to nowhere and it says closed indefinitely. Yeah, it's hilarious. But then you have even the alien who comes down and gets this rock and they're all baffled and they just watch him and then he just goes up in his ship and everybody's kind of talking about it. And then whenever he does visit them again, he just drops the rock back down to where it was, and then they leave, and almost as if that was futile.
Yeah.
Even for the alien, his existence was pointless because they just kind of cataloged this rock, and now they moved on to another one, and it was just like
that's it.
That was it. That was the pointlessness of that, and it does go back to I think what the heart of what you say in the review, and maybe I would have felt different if this movie had released 5-6 years ago. But it's like this tried and true message that Hollywood continues to. It's not even I would say Wes Anderson is promoting in this.
No,
it's just more or less his maybe prescription for life or the way he sees things.
That is something more personal. Like this is his view on life, but it's just to me such a. It's displayed in the film. I mentioned in the review, it's displayed like it's supposed to be this hopeful thing of, we can't really truly understand our purpose in life, but as long as we surround ourselves with good people and enjoy the journey and I'm just like, that's not hopeful. That's such a sad, that's a meaningless life.
Yeah. Well, I told you, I think, Keith, after you recorded the review, I said I liken that to Boyhood, which one of our very first reviews on the podcast, and I was like, for a movie that literally is just showcasing this boy growing up throughout film, but it's supposed to be this kind of magnificent scene of actually literally seeing him grow up on screen in the span of that film. I'm like, the way the movie ends on a more kind of tepid, pointless, we're just all floating around on this space rock, just enjoying it. Like, there's no greater ascendance of purpose. I'm like, for somebody who spends as much time crafting and detailing this world and putting it on film and is very particular about how it is crafted, that there's a purpose in that. There is a reason, and you put that time and detail into your craft, and yet you're underscoring that very purpose that you put into this film by just kind of having a bleak message for everybody. It's almost like, well, maybe that's true for me, but not necessarily for you. I just find it loaded and full of crap, more or less. And I'm not saying that the movie doesn't browbeat you with that.
No,
it almost, in a weird way, and this is maybe one of the bigger flaws I have with the film, it kind of takes a back seat. There really is no message, and it's just kind of, you can take it as a quirky story. And I think also it's funny that this did come out before Oppenheimer, but it does the whole black and white and color
Yeah.
with the reality versus the film that the movie is supposed to be about. I thought that was kind of a funny trope that we saw with Oppenheimer, which got way more buzz.
Yeah, we saw like 2 months ago. That was another thing is like with the framing a narrative within a narrative that, like I said in the review, like French Dispatch just did that much better, where it's a newspaper and each story is framed around there being different stories from different like sections of the newspaper. And I was like, that was such a much more creative way to do a story within a story, whereas this one's just a documentary of a play, and the black and white's the documentary part, whereas the color is the actual play. And I'm like, that it's fine. There's nothing wrong with framing it that way. But literally, this is like your next movie right after doing a narrative within a narrative, and it's so much less creative. And it's not done poorly, but it's nothing that, like, it's nothing I hadn't seen before. And coming from Wes Anderson, who's usually so much more creative, it was just kind of disappointing.
Yeah, it's almost like he nailed the set design and the creativity there. But other than that, the story just fell flat.
Yeah. Well, there's things that happen in a lot of Wes Anderson movies that I think kind of, when they happen, they catch you off guard and they're hilarious.
The Roadrunner.
Like, I mean, well, there was the Roadrunner, but actually there's a thing about the Roadrunner that I wished that I was expecting to happen that didn't happen, and it's like one of those little random moments that I think, had something like that been there, I probably would have like fell off the couch laughing, like when Jeff Goldblum beats a dog with a newspaper in The Life Aquatic, and it's like, I'm not expecting that. It plays no role in the movie at all. He just gets up and hits a dog, and it's hilarious. and I love that. But I was like, there was this scene where the Roadrunner like runs across the street in front of these two little girls that are playing in the distance. And I was sitting there thinking, if that Roadrunner like walks up and pecks one of them, and they say, like, if the little girl just goes shit or something like that, I was like, I would die right now. Like, I was watching it happen in my head. And nothing quirky like that ever really happened. I mean, there were a couple of funny things with like it showing up and that kind of stuff, but I'm just like, there's so many moments where I was thinking, that I was waiting for one of those random things to happen, and they never happened. It was just, to me, this was one of the least comical movie or least unpredictable movies that he's done.
And I think that's why I like the Alien so much, is because that was the most not that, because they foreshadow the alien at the beginning, so you knew something was going to happen, but I wasn't expecting it to be displayed the way it was.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So, and that's why I loved it so much, because I was like, that's the only thing in the movie that just kind of comes out of left field, because you're not expecting like this stop motion stick figure to come out in this live action movie, and I was like, that was hilarious.
Well, another quirky thing that I laughed at is right after the alien visits and they're in quarantine, and of course you have this one kid who's throughout the whole movie like testing his limits.
The daring.
And he's like, you dare me? And he's like, and it has the button do not push, and he's like, well, if I push that button, and they go on a couple scenes, well then that comes back and you find out he touched the button, and his dad, he's like, he said at the time, he was like, if you touch that, I'm going to kill you.
You'll break your neck.
I'll break your neck. You see him just run and through another scene, and the dad just comes right after him. And there's still that humor that is there that's funny. But really, when it goes back to even the black and white, and it just, there were times where I'm like, okay, is he trying to be meta? Is he trying to break the fourth wall? Like he obviously does in the Wes Anderson style. But there's also this moment of like, okay, but what is the greater message he's trying to send us here? Is there one? Is he kind of just covering it in this weird facade of like, I'm being obtuse for a purpose of just letting you figure that out? But I don't know, that's where I lose the interest in terms of what I loved walking away from, like Grand Budapest Hotel.
Yes.
Or even I even loved Isle of Dogs.
Yeah.
I thought that was good.
Yeah.
Just as a good fun story.
I think, because I agree with you, because there's two moments, and they're both in the black and white documentary frame, where I liked what he was going for, but because the message was so hollow, it didn't really hit me with the emotion I wanted. And that's the scene when he goes to the director and he's like, I keep playing this character, but I don't feel like I'm doing it right. And then the scene where he meets the actress across the balcony that was supposed to play his wife.
Yeah.
And I'm like, both of those scenes, the way they're set up, are so well done that you really could have driven home this serious emotional point you were trying to make. But because the point is just kind of, well, there is no meaning, like they both fell flat to me. I was like, they could have been really good emotional scenes.
Yeah. No, I agree. And it's funny because I don't know if it's just getting used to the Wes Anderson style or getting used to seeing all the celebrities. I mean, it's kind of what drew me out of Oppenheimer. There being so many stars that aren't huge, but if you watch enough movies, you've seen them in a lot of things.
Yeah.
That you start seeing people that you're like, oh, I've seen them in this and this, and it's kind of distracting.
Yeah.
You don't get that out of this movie because it's Wes Anderson. There's just certain staples you expect to be in all of his movies.
Yeah.
But there were certain times where I was just kind of drawn away from what they were saying in their performance because I'm just so used to the dry humor and the writing that it got to a point where I was like, am I just getting too, familiarized with this? I mean, I think of Tarantino and it's like, the way I kind of likened it to is if I sat down and watched all of Tarantino's movies back to back, by the time I get to Inglourious Bastards or even Django, I'm probably going to be like, all right, I'm done. I'm Tarantino'd out.
Yeah.
Like they're not movies that I think you have to watch in one sitting. It's nice that you have long periods of breaks before you get a taste of that director's style. And I think Wes Anderson is that kind of person. Yeah. And maybe because French Dispatch was just last year, and I mean, heck, he's doing a string of short films that's coming out on Netflix later this year in October. I can't remember there's like 4 short films that he's doing for Netflix, and that's Wes Anderson's project.
The one feature that's supposed to come out this month is based on the Roald Dahl story. And
that's actually what it is. I thought it was feature length. I think it's 4 short films.
I thought it was supposed to be all one, like 4
Maybe
shorts
they are
in the one movie.
Maybe they are.
Because I think they're based on, because they were all short. The Roald Dahl stories were like short stories, and I think he's adapting like each short story.
But I'm like, he's one of those directors with such a particular way of doing things that I love his style. But it's one of those things where I'm like, am I just getting, worn out with it? Like, I'm not tired of Wes Anderson. But I'm like, I can take a break for a while. I don't need to see the way he does it day or movie in and movie out. It's kind of wearing on me.
So it isn't. I mean, it is based on the Roald Dahl stories, but they are going to be. It's like I said, it's like a 4-night event, so it's going to be like a short film each, and they're all based around like this. The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar has Benedict Cumberbatch, and they are based on those stories, but there are going to be a set of 4 short films released over. I think it says 4 days.
Oh, it's over 4 days.
You're invited to a wonderful week of new Wes Anderson shorts this September.
It is this month. Okay.
Yeah. I knew it was the end of the month. The shorts will be released in equally unique fashion with 1 film a day hitting the service starting with Henry Sugar on September 27th. The Swan, the Ratcatcher, and Poison will follow the 28th, 29th, and 30th. So yeah, each day they're dropping a short film based on the Roald Dahl.
So I don't know. I'll toss that question over to you all. Are you all getting tapped out on Wes Anderson or
I wasn't until this movie.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, if these shorts are all really well done and I enjoy them, I'm not so much tapped out. I just, like you said, usually there's so much time in between the Wes Anderson films that I feel like it gives him time to recharge that creativity. And Asteroid City being right after the French Dispatch, having similar frame within a frame narrative, and so many similarities with all his other past films. I'm like, this one just didn't feel like it was something that was unique and creative. It feels like something he just churned out within a year, which is what he did.
Yeah. And I also think, too, bringing up the French Dispatch, I could easily see people seeing French Dispatch or Asteroid City, one or the other, since they release so close together, and liking one and not the other, depending on which one they saw first. Not only just because of some similarities. Go ahead.
I was just saying, one movie you get to see Lady Sado boobies, and the other movie you get to see Scarlett Johansson boobies. So
do you?
Very briefly in the mirror.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you see more of Lady Sado.
I have not seen the French Dispatch.
So I'm just saying, it depends on which boobies you want to see more.
I'll have to go see that.
Yeah, she's actually more a longer scene full on because the guy's like an artist.
Several scenes.
Whereas
her and Benicio del Toro.
Where ScarJo was just very briefly, she takes like the robe off and you see her in the mirror and then it cuts away, and I was just like, okay.
I mean, here's the thing though. I don't know if it is just the writing and
there's writing when you got boobies.
I'm trying to move on from the boobies.
Yeah.
But no, I don't know if it's just the writing that I'm getting used to with Wes Anderson, or again, kind of the subtle undertones of you have to be very highbrow to understand it on his level, and I just don't take it as that.
No,
I'm
I don't
not
agree with that.
highbrow, and
Right.
I also am not the first person to sit here and say like, "Oh, I found that there's this deep, underlying meaning in all of his
No, if
films."
anything,
It's
it's milquetoast.
I take most of his films at face value, and I love them, and that's one of the things I guess that kind of disappointed me about this movie is like. Wes Anderson is one of those directors. He's a filmmaker that I look forward to his next release. Like Nolan, it's like they're so far between. It's like as soon as you see Christopher Nolan's name pop up on the screen, you're like, oh, crap.
Right.
Like, I can't wait to see it like we were about Tenet. And, of course, Tenet was lackluster.
Right.
But when we saw the trailer and stuff for it and saw his name attached to it,
Oh, yeah,
we
get
were like,
psyched.
oh, yeah, your freaking hairs on your neck stand up. He's one of those directors. And Wes Anderson's not as serious. He's much more just kind of like chaotic and random and comical. But yeah, I look forward to them. And this is one that I kind of was like, I'm looking forward to seeing this. And then it just didn't hit the right way. I
Right.
don't know.
Maybe
and I
it
haven't
is just-
seen French Dispatch either, so I don't know.
I wonder if
think-
it is just poor timing. I don't know if it just because of when it came out, when it, if it just, I don't. I'm in this weird emotional state right now where I'm just like I can lay off some Wes Anderson for a while. I don't really need to see any of his work right now. I don't, almost in the same way that I would like in Nolan. And I'm not saying that to each their own, but it's like even Nolan. It's like if I watched, I mean, I would even argue if I watched like Inception and then Interstellar and then even Tenet being the lackluster
After
one.
a while, you kind of get a little burned out.
Right.
Yeah.
But even then, there's still enough differentiations between those films based on not only subject matter, but in the way they're, the scope and the grandeur
the way
of the
they
film.
make you think.
Right.
That's the thing. Is like one of them makes you think about time. The other one makes you think about, aerospace and physics and all this stuff. I just...
And even the genre there is varying. He's got war films. He has Batman. He
True,
has...
yeah.
So it's like you mix it up a little bit that way, and it's
Right.
not quite the same thing.
Well, and I liken it to even like a Spielberg film of Spielberg's one of those classic directors, more so in his earlier years rather than later. But he's one of those directors that it's like, he has a certain signature that you can definitely tell what a Spielberg film is. But I can watch Jaws. I can watch Jurassic Park. I can watch Indiana Jones. I can watch all of the, Schindler's List. I mean, there's a varying degree of not only categories and genres that he covers and even material in terms of story and scope, but there's just a wide array of which his catalog is so diverse. Whereas when it comes to someone like Wes Anderson, again, not to knock him, he's found his shtick. He likes that way of filmmaking. And again, if you're going to sprinkle him in with other directors and other movies, that's why he's a standout, because he has that certain style and that certain prowess. But for me, it's just I can only have so much of that food before I'm kind of like, all right, I'm tired of eating this right now. I want something new. And that's kind of where I'm at with Wes Anderson right now. I just, I'm not saying he's done or he's washed up. I think if there's one thing that I absolutely still love about Wes Anderson and that I loved about this film, that is definitely not a negative, is the production design. I thought as far as production design goes, it was one of his better films. The amount of, I think I told y'all during the review, I watched a little featurette of them building the set out in the middle of the desert. I think it was actually filmed in Spain. But the rocks in the background and how they were these fake foam formations.
Yeah.
But the way they put it, he blends in such a way the cartoonish with the realism.
Yeah.
And then also just the classic, style of the 1950s artistic nature. It was very well received in that regard. I absolutely loved.
I read somewhere that he shot it on Kodachrome film.
Which and honestly, I could see that.
It's not even in production anymore, so I don't know how he found it or used it. But I mean, maybe they
paid
made
someone
it
to
just
make
for
it,
the
yeah.
film.
Yeah.
But I had read somewhere that he shot on Kodachrome 24, 25.
And it
is
does
what
have a
what it
unique
was.
color palette.
Yeah.
And I thought it looked great. I mean, cinematography-wise, of course, it's, again, classic Wes Anderson.
Yeah.
It doesn't disappoint. I mean, talk about one thing that you could say if you're getting tired of a certain director's style, but that's one thing I enjoy remarkably about all of his movies is every one of them has that particular set, of set style that is used, but it's always unique. It's just, I think, in terms of substance and material and story, like we were just talking about with Nolan, they get you to think about different things or even certain story aspects that are they're different in a way that you're not revisiting the same you're not watching the same movie twice when you watch one of his films.
Yeah.
You're still watching. Yes, it has Nolan's signature and it has the way he does things, because obviously each director has their own style, but every movie is different in his catalog versus Wes Anderson's. They all follow kind of the same beat for beat, type of, story structure, which isn't bad. It's not bad. I'm kind of like, all right, I'm a little tired of it right now. I'm gonna watch probably all the short films that are coming out at the end of the month. I'll see what those have to offer, and who knows, maybe they'll be just unique and different enough that I'm like, all right, no, he's won me back over this round. So we'll see. But 2.5 out of 4 stars for Asteroid City.
Asteroid City.
Take what you will of what we've said, and that's indeed it. But we're gonna move on now to our headlines. All right, we got one major headline to talk about this week because we already covered our other headline at the beginning of the show. All of our Spectrum and Charter members out there that are happy that Disney's back. They got to watch Monday Night Sports. But we're going to talk about something. I think you all will you'll like the title of this week's episode that I made, which is Rotten Tomatoes is rotten.
That's clever.
Ha! How about that? Took a genius to come up with that title.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about it. We've had our own fair share of criticism of Rotten Tomatoes here on the show. We've had, I think, over the last several years, plenty of times that's come up as points of, there's times where it's points of contention and there's other times where it's points of praise. But ultimately, I think we've now reached a point where it's getting a fair bit of criticism for the right reasons. Some points I agree with in the article that we linked to in the description. Other parts I think are a little bit loaded in terms of why they are going after Rotten Tomatoes. But it's kind of no secret that really, when it comes to a review aggregate site, there's a chance that things can get a little dicey and they can get a little loaded when it comes to beefing up certain review scores. And that seems to be what Rotten Tomatoes is being accused of and what they're being targeted with right now. So let's kind of dive into it a little bit and talk about it.
Yeah.
Is that it?
I mean, no, I have more to say. I just didn't know if someone wanted to go first.
So this whole thing came up when an employee with Rotten Tomatoes, right? They sent an email out or released something about a movie. Was it Ophelia, and how that someone was paying for reviews.
A publicity company, Bunker 15. So they were, I guess they took on the project of Ophelia to promote the movie for publicity. And it said early screenings, of which there was 13, 7 of the 13 came back negative, which would translate to a score of 46.
Right. Rotten.
Which is rotten. Anything under 60 is rotten.
Yep.
So instead of, because many publicity companies, it says, will go out and they'll try to get like the best and most top-notch critics to watch their movie and review it and put it on the review. They said they took the opposite approach, in which they enlisted as many like small-time. It says, while most I actually got it up. While most film PR companies aim to get the attention of critics from top publications, Bunker 15 takes a more bottom-up approach, recruiting obscure, often self-published critics who are nevertheless part of the pool tracked by Rotten Tomatoes. In another break from standard practice, several critics say Bunker 15 pays them $50 or more for each review. And typically, payments are not typically disclosed, and Rotten Tomatoes says it prohibits reviewing based on financial incentive. But of course, they could say, we don't allow that, but it's happening. So,
well, I was going to say, I think this is kind of the unspoken secret of the industry in terms of, they go on later in the article to kind of point out and directly say how easy it is to kind of bolster numbers and reviews, but also how it's become a marketing tactic because people have used it as a cheap way of saying, well, if we get in early and we get a certain amount of reviews that are positive, we can then buttress our release window with positive reviews from Rotten Tomatoes saying certified fresh. Yeah. Now it's become this marketing buzzword in the industry to help basically push people to the theater saying, well, if Rotten Tomatoes can be trusted, I mean, and I do agree with their points of criticism throughout the article, where they're talking about how it's a simple review aggregate. You literally don't even have a varying degree. It's either a positive or negative in terms of the two camps that they put
it's
reviews
just based
in.
on numbers of good reviews versus number of bad reviews.
Yeah, but their point of criticism being that even when there's a gray area of someone like us even talking about 2.5 stars, that would technically take what we said and consider that a negative review.
Yeah.
Even though if you're looking at face value of these reviews individually, then you could potentially come in and say, well, they kind of liked it though, and there are some merits here to warrant a viewing of this film. It may not necessarily be a terrible, rotten film, but also at the same time, it may not be something I'm going to thoroughly... But hey, you know what? I trust these guys and their opinion, so I'll go with them. Whereas all they're doing is saying it simply breaks it down into positive, negative, and then it lumps those together, and then it shuffles all of them and says, here's the aggregate of positive versus negative reviews. There's your percentage.
Yep. And what these companies are trying to do is get that percentage up higher. The part like what Sean was talking about with the email is actually in here, where they have that email from an employee of Bunker 15 that sent out an email to a critic basically saying it's a Sundance film, and the feeling is that it's been treated a bit harshly by some critics. I'm sure Sky High expectations were the culprit, so the teams involved feel like it would benefit from more input from different critics. And that's where they're chastising them, is that they knew, well, it's a Sundance film and they were trying to aim for Oscars. They're trying to make it this, critically acclaimed film for award season. So they're like, well, some critics reviewed it badly, so we would like these other critics to review.
Well, that's where the one of the critics writes and says, well, what if I hate the film? What would happen if I wrote a review and I hated it? And the Bunker 15 employee replied back and said, of course, we want journalists to be free to write whatever they like, but super nice ones often agree not to publish bad reviews on their usual websites, but instead quarantine them on smaller blogs that Rotten Tomatoes, never sees.
Right.
So that's
Just
essentially saying it's like, oh, if you're a nice reviewer, you won't give us a negative review, you'll publish it where nobody will ever see it.
It's the whole wink, wink, nod, nod.
Yes.
And look,
do us a favor.
It's what any promotional production house, or not even production house, a PR firm is going to do.
Yeah.
The whole point is to, if you've been hired out by a production company to go out and promote a film, you want to give it the best positive buzz it can, because you're trying to make your client happy, which happens to be the production company pushing the film. The problem becomes the disingenuous nature, obviously. And I'm going to read another part from the article, which I think is interesting, from a filmmaker Paul Schrader. He says, the studios didn't invent Rotten Tomatoes, and most of them don't like it. But the system is broken. Audiences are dumber. Normal people don't go through reviews like they used to. Rotten Tomatoes is something the studios can game, so they do. Part of me is sitting here thinking, yes, I agree that most people do hate it and they think it's a rigged system, but I think it's a little funny that he's going to point the finger at the audience and say they're dumber, and they're the ones who are just kind of, no,
which is
this
funny,
is the
because most
problem.
Audiences, I feel like, don't like Rotten Tomatoes either. Every time I see someone, they're like, I don't go by that score.
This is the reason you have audience
That's true.
scores.
Yeah.
And we're going to get onto that topic here in a sec. But the funny thing I think is interesting about that is, no, you have the problem right now, and we talked about this a little bit on last week's show, of way too much excess content. There's so much out there to consume that you're taking, the audience member and the consumer is taking the path of least resistance.
Yep.
They're going somewhere that they can just briefly look at something and say, am I going to love it or hate it? And look, there are going to be those who dive in deeper, who take it a little bit more seriously, but I also think it's a little slap in the face to not only say the audiences are dumber, but to then act like there's this upper echelon elitist movie review critic to say that, oh yeah, well this is someone you can trust, and they're really their opinion is the one that you should take with you shouldn't take for granted, and these others should take with a grain of salt. And I think it's very highbrow, and the pot calling the kettle black, when you're willing to point out that the audience isn't taking the time to read these sophisticated reviews, and instead they're just looking at a percentage to get a quick idea as to whether or not they're going to like something. I'm like, look, that's the whole point of the system. And like we've done in terms of criticizing it and praising it in the way that we know Rotten Tomatoes is rigged, and it does have verification issues that we think they can address. Overall, the point of it is to give you a quick overlook of what it is that you're going to either maybe find favorable and risk spending your time watching, or you're going to sit there and say, no, I know who's liking this film. I know who's pushing this.
We know who likes Transformers. They are, and yes, they are dumb, but still, no.
Well, no. Okay, take Transformers. Take any of the major blockbuster films. Whether it's Fast and the Furious franchise. I mean, we've even joked about how some critics.
I was actually going to bring that up. Yeah.
Go ahead. Well, go ahead. Yeah.
I just think it's funny that they call audiences dumber, yet we've noticed critics follow the trends of audiences. They used to hate Marvel, then they love Marvel. Now that audiences don't like Marvel, they're starting to come back around to hating Marvel again. And it's like, why is it that you're always 2 steps behind the audience opinion? And once you realize, oh, Marvel's not going anywhere, audience love it, we got to praise them now.
Well, and I think, and again, this goes back to the larger question of that you could easily ask, which is, who are you making these movies for?
Yeah.
Is it for your elitist Hollywood friends that are watching it in the movie houses?
Or the people paying to see it?
Or the people who are spending their hard-earned money to go be entertained in the theater?
Right.
It depends on what kind of movie. I mean,
I'm too dumb.
It's funny because, and I don't know if it's the same guy. I don't want to just bash on him, but I want to say that it's interesting because further down in the article, they do almost kind of a 180 to refute that point he made, in the sense that they're saying there are people who are at these, film festivals that will review these Oscar baity films, and a lot of them, sometimes they're caught up on jet lag, or they're trying to give a little pat on the back to their friends that they know in the movie biz, and so they pass along a more positive score to their buddy in the industry so that they can get their Oscar hopeful, or they get the positive buzz out of the gate so that they get more people and more butts in the seats of opening weekend.
And they mentioned that directly. I don't remember which director was talking about, where he talked about, I wanted to screen a film more widely, but the movie had 100% on, and the studio didn't want to damage that because they wanted to use the 100% graphic in their marketing. I said, why don't we get a couple more reviews? And they were like, we just want the 100. And it's like, yeah, it looks good in marketing, but
it's also funny because the first thing is,
like, we don't want to read anymore. There might be a bad one.
Yeah. And honestly, it's like, as someone who follows the movie industry, yes, I mean, we obviously are going to take it more with a grain of salt than someone, an average viewer. But what average viewer isn't also going to see 100% certified and also think 100%
from 15 reviews?
Yeah,
because we've done that before.
Of course, they don't ever acknowledge how many reviews.
Yeah.
We will look at that.
Yeah.
But anybody seeing it as I mean, look. It's an advertisement. It's literally as dumb as people being like, well, advertising doesn't work, but hey, I love that commercial. That's great. And then you go out and buy it. And it's like, advertisement 90% of the time is for the people who are already bought into the product. They're the ones who are paying attention and then patting themselves on the back for participating.
Unless you're Bud Light and you just want to go down in flames.
Well, they just completely tarnish their product. Exactly. But I do find it hilarious that it's like most people are not going to see 100%.
Yeah.
Rotten or a certified fresh score in a trailer and think, oh, I can trust that. And trust me, my parents aren't dumb. They know how these Hollywood highbrow people are, and the first thing they think of is when they see, oh, critics are raving about this, they're immediately like, well, we're probably going to hate it then.
Yep.
Because most of the time you get critics who end up giving favorable scores to these very, they talk down to you.
Yep,
They're pretentious. Exactly.
I don't know a single person in my family that actually trusts Rotten Tomatoes. Like, all of them are just like, I don't care what the critics say.
Even if I do, I trust the audience score. I trust the score of the people that have gone to see it and either been entertained or not.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm going to see a movie to be entertained. I'm not going to understand the meaning of life or listen to your like woke biases from these critics, because that's the other thing is most of the critics don't take any of the values or any of the lessons that we would take from a film and from the story they're trying to tell. They only take one side of it. They only take the LGBT and and all this other stuff.
When it virtue signals.
Yeah, they only talk about that stuff. They don't talk about anything else. I think it's interesting, though. You did say, well, the movie with the 100%. I'd like to know what it was. It was a 2022 title, but it says that movie won an Oscar. So I'm like, they're basically saying, like, because of that 100% in their marketing that they were able to put up on the posters and everything, it ended up winning an Oscar.
And
I'm like, what 2022 movie won an Oscar that we would agree deserved it? Like,
well, but here's the thing: I'd have to know what movie.
Well, that's
it was.
What they won't say the title, but
I do find it funny because they do talk about the movie Hoop Dreams. From here, I'll just read the paragraph. It says, "This is probably because Rotten Tomatoes, with the help of Yelp and Goodreads and countless other review aggregators, has desensitized us to the opinions of individual critics. Once upon a time, Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert turned a no-budget documentary, Hoop Dreams, into a phenomenon using only their thumbs. But critical power like that has been replaced by the collective voice of the masses. A third of U.S. adults say they check Rotten Tomatoes before going to the multiplex. And while movie ads use them to tout blurbage of Jeff Lyons and Peter Travers, now they're more likely to boast films that have been certified fresh. But the funny thing is I feel like that even in of itself is you're giving into the idea that, oh, well, because there's a trend that we notice audience goers are paying attention to, well, then it's like I don't blame the studios and the PR firms for them backing that trend and saying, well, this is what people are promoting just by virtue of checking it out. We're going to pump that up. But is that a fault of the system, or is that a fault of just people going to this place? Because here's the thing, the more unreliable it gets,
Yes.
the harder it's going to be to convince people that Rotten Tomatoes is worth trusting.
Yep.
That's what I think is so funny is it's a snake eating its own tail. It's like Rotten Tomatoes is only worthwhile in so much as you go and see a movie based on what it suggests is fresh or rotten, and then you end up walking away saying, no, I disagree or I agree. And it's like that alone is going to curtail your thoughts on how often you can trust Rotten Tomatoes if you're going to hold it in that higher regard. But it says to filmmakers across the spectrum, Rotten Tomatoes is a scourge. Martin Scorsese has reduced the director to a content manufacturer and the viewer to an unadventurous consumer. Where I do agree with Scorsese here is kind of like his problem and criticism of the Marvel industry with it being popcorn flicks and theme park rides.
Yeah.
Where I do agree with him is like, it sometimes you don't it blurs your unintended, like it gives you an impression before you just go in and watch a movie completely blind. And I'd be honest if there weren't times where I definitely made a decision on countless occasions of smaller flicks or whatnot, or even if something I thought about, giving a movie a try, and then I see the Rotten Tomato score, I'm like, well, if not that many people liked it, it's probably milquetoast, so I'm probably just not going to waste my time with it. And that's the thing. Scorsese's kind of like, no. That may be a hidden gem you enjoy, and you're on the opposite end where you absolutely love it and others hated it. Like Mortal Kombat 1995, great movie. Certified Rotten, great movie. Oscar winner, Best Picture ever made. But it is interesting that you do have these people who will see the score, refuse to watch the film, kind of take a back seat and say, all right, that's a pass for me. Yeah. And I will say I hate when sometimes even on Max, when I get on there, or even if I don't know if Netflix still does it for some of their films that they release in theaters, but they have the Rotten Tomato score on there when you go to see the film. And I'm like, I hate that. I'm like, don't tell me before I click on the movie whether it's good or bad, because it's like I do want to
discover that for myself.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to have my own opinion as to whether or not I think this is a worthwhile movie. So sometimes it does influence your opinion in that negative sense that you're not willing to try something that you might have before.
See, I see that. I'm more of a person that it's like, even though I see that the movie might not be that great, or at least according to critics or audience, it's like I still want to see it for myself because I want to see if I disagree or agree. And that's kind of where I fall on it. I still look for the divide between the critics and the audience score, because I think that's one of the most telling things about it. But I think, critics can be bought. Audience members can't. And that's why I still think it's important to have something like this, or even something like Metacritic. There's got to be something.
Cinema Score.
There's got to be something where the average moviegoer gets to have a say in whether they thought this was entertaining or not, versus the critics. Because I still, even the emails that we're reading in this article, the critics can be bought, and they can be not the $100 handshake kind of bought, but they can be
influenced.
Yes, they can be influenced.
Or think about it. Even if you come to a review site that's small traffic, but you're giving them $50-$100 or something for a review, and it's kind of like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But also, it's the idea too that you're going to get publicity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're going to get exposure now from being a positive review.
Yeah.
Especially these highbrow films that only do receive. That's what I think is so funny is you see some of these movies that only receive a handful of reviews, 16, 17 reviews. And it's like, well, no wonder it's 80%. Because the only people who saw this were these people who would enjoy this film anyway, or it only appealed to them, and nobody else really cared to watch it.
Or it's like you said, they're the good reviews are loaded up front because this article does mention Marvel and Ant-Man Quantumania, how early on it had like an 80-something. I think it's at 86.
Yes.
Where only good reviews were on there, but then as the movie was out and they were allowing all these more reviews, it dropped way down to I think like 60-something because people realized this isn't good. This is garbage.
Well, yeah.
And
that's
then,
crap.
and then they also bring up the fact that it backfired for something like Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
Where it came out and they released it to the people who were at these film festivals and they all disliked it. So then the Rotten Tomatoes score was really low in like the 30s.
And people didn't want to go see it.
And then it actually kind of bumped up when people saw it in the theaters. And I think it ended up settling at like it's in the 60s right now.
Yeah.
But it's funny that it's like that's a perfect example of how it can backfire on you too,
Yeah.
which it's not a foolproof method.
Yeah.
But it underscores the very point of Rotten Tomatoes not being something that is, oh yeah, this is the only aggregate you go by.
Yeah, it's not a definitive. I like
No.
you said, I like Cinema Score because that is actually just a poll where an exit poll, whereas people are leaving the theater like, did you like this movie or not? And it's kind of nice
Well,
to
and
get that initial
anymore,
reaction.
who is taking in? I mean, if you're really a diehard cinephile, or even you're someone who, even us who watch and review movies on a regular basis, have our own. We have a podcast about our own opinions on these movies. But it's like even your average film goers, it's like if they're really interested in seeing something, they're not going to just go to Rotten Tomatoes and see the percentage and that's it. They're going to do a little bit more digging. And there's that's the thing too, is you can go down and read the blurbs from people who have reviewed it and who are their certified critics or who are the audience scores.
Yeah.
And in fact, I kind of wanted to pivot to the audience scores because that's the next beef that I have with this article, but also what I think most ire has come for or from Rotten Tomatoes in the recent past, because they specifically bring up the whole Marvel or Captain Marvel incident.
Yeah.
But let's get into that. It says another problem where the trickery often begins is that Rotten Tomato scores are posted after a movie receives only a handful of reviews, sometimes as few as 5. Even if those reviews may be an unrepresentative sample, this is sort of like a cable news network declaring an election night winner after a single county reports its results. But studios see it as a feature since that is a little elbow grease. They can sometimes fool people into believing the movie is better than it is. We were just talking about that with regards to whether it was Indiana Jones that failed miserably or Ant-Man and Quantumania. But then, sorry, I want to scroll down because it gets into a little bit more. I want to talk about specifically the Captain Marvel.
It's Rotten Tomatoes allows you. I have
go ahead. Go ahead.
Rotten Tomatoes allows users to rate movies alongside critics, and 3 years after the Fandango deal, it changed the way these audience scores were calculated. Misogynist trolls had hijacked the platform. They didn't hijack crap, but coordinating.
That's Vulture.com for you.
All these people were coordinating, but anyways, they were coordinating to tank women-led movies.
Real quick, highbrow elitists.
Oh, I know.
Yeah,
It is.
Anyways.
Absolutely. So anyways, misogynist trolls had hijacked the platform, coordinating to tank women-led movies, which what didn't happen, like Captain Marvel, before they opened. It was the only movie it happened to, and rightfully so.
Yeah, it's funny because Wonder Woman, I'm pretty sure, was women-led, and
Wonder
it
Woman
was
did
great.
fine.
Yeah.
There's like no other woman-led movie that tanked that. Like there's just this master plan to tank all women-led films.
Yeah. Yep.
As a fix for users' reviews to count, they would need to verify that they bought tickets, which they could do most easily by purchasing them via Fandango. Drive them to the service you just bought.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Under the new rules, audience scores for tentpole movies have often gotten an early lift since most of the first weekend crowds are diehards who buy tickets in advance. In June, ads for The Flash bragged about an audience score of 95% as of June 14th, which was the Wednesday that showtimes began in international markets such as Belgium and Finland, but 2 days before the film's U.S. release. That score is 83. Today the score is 83. So which isn't that far different from 95. A bigger change came in 2018 when Rotten Tomatoes loosened the restriction on whose reviews could be indexed, once the site had required its contributors to write for publications with substantial web traffic or print circulations. Now, more freelance and self-publishing critics have been allowed to join, along with some who review movies via YouTube or podcast. Hey, we can join.
Well,
There we
but
go.
that's the thing. If you read just before that, that's what I love about the little creative asterisk that they added there of, but you have to have a certain amount of reach. Which, look, it's not my platform. They can run it however they want. But the idea of the audience score used to be that the average viewer could get on there, and it was like what you were just saying, Sean. It gives you a voice in saying, this is how I felt about the film. Granted, I get the backlash of Rotten Tomatoes for allowing trolls to get on there and trounce a film.
Yeah.
Here's the issue, though, is anytime you try to go against the internet's going to win.
Yeah.
And the problem that we found with these trends is that, look, they happen for a short period of time. You have to weather the storm, let it last, and then it falls off. The problem is that when you try to get involved and then you try to jerry-rig it in your favor of saying, well, now we're trying to be fair. No, now you're just trying to load it in a certain favorable perspective that is going to look skewed towards getting rid of those who may try to look. Because the whole point of having any kind of review base at all is that you get to lead with your opinion.
Yeah.
Whether it's valid or not. Let the users make that choice with the amount of gravity they give to the system.
We're too dumb to actually read the reviews.
Right. Because audiences are just getting dumber.
It's just like the showrunner from The Witcher. Well, we had to change stuff from the books because American audiences are too dumb to understand it. It's like, thanks. I guess we're all just too stupid to understand your works.
Yeah, never mind that we just made Oppenheimer, $900 million at the box office. And
audiences are stupid, Brandon.
That's right.
Don't show contrary facts.
But I do find, that's where I find this to be the most revealing as to them trying to make this a hit piece on Rotten Tomatoes. And look, I will agree with them that, yes, Rotten Tomatoes is rotten in the sense that it's been known for quite some time that the review aggregates are not the most, articulate, and they're not the most well-rounded. But at the same time, if it's the only review score that you're going to, then I would just simply say, look, why don't you make... and that's kind of what the article's, I think, ultimately doing, is they're saying, look, you can't trust them. Okay, that's fine. But you have to leave it up to the viewer. Either one, to trust their scores in so much as that the moment they see something they disagree with, they're no longer going to trust it, or you're going to go to other places, whether it's IMDb. You get on there, they have their own 10-point scale. And they have their own ways for which you can attribute to the review scores and whether or not you get counted. But also, I do think it is interesting because, when you do focus on the audience scores, regardless of these safeguards they've quote-unquote put in place since the whole Captain Marvel incident, audiences, we've seen a bigger divide between audiences and critics. We've seen, like you said, that stark contrast of certain movies that we expect are going to be the Oscar baity films versus what average film goers are going to like. And yet, to then have disdain towards the average film goer because they didn't like a certain movie that somehow the critics they understood it more so than average audience goers. Yeah. Again, who are you making these movies for? When did the movie industry specifically become only about the golden statuette? That's
2008.
Touche. No, I just it kills me that it's like they're making this claim, they're making this argument against Rotten Tomatoes, and at the same time they're validating it as well.
Yeah.
It's like you're giving
it's like it's evil, but it's good. It's like, okay,
right? Because people do go to it so instead of giving it props for where it can drive people to the theater to see movies that they want to see, or better yet, maybe saying, okay, well, what if they do start to incorporate a different way of aggregating scores in terms of giving things more of a positive or more of a having the gradation of strongly hated it, somewhat it was milquetoast, or really good, or it was okay.
But again, that's another issue of trying to make everything like there's always going to be some flaw. You're never going to be able to make anything perfectly 100% fair. I know that's the ideal we strive for. In a perfect world, we could.
Life's not fair.
But there's always going to be ways. Yeah, but there's always going to be ways to kind of manipulate things. And it's like, and part of this is also the production companies for using Rotten Tomatoes as a marketing gimmick. It's like, okay, a lot of people didn't really know Rotten Tomatoes until you started seeing it in trailers of, this movie has a 90%. This movie has, I mean, I remember when Black Panther came out, they heavily plastered the Rotten Tomatoes
of course,
all over the trailer. And it's like, okay, now you're propping it up as the definitive source of what's a good or bad movie. So you've trapped yourself in this cycle of, well, audience goers are going to Rotten Tomatoes to find out whether the movie's good or not. And it's like, well, yeah, because you keep promoting it as the source to find out whether a movie's good or not.
And I still can't help but still go back to the idea that people are inundated with, I mean, we're on social media all the time. We're on our phones. We're constantly being bombarded with things that take up our time. And if anything has become increasingly, whether for good or bad, it has been increasingly harder to get is time. And it's like, with that being the case, I mean, like, look, we're in a time, we're at a moment in history where it's getting more and more bifurcated how we spend our time, whether it's with our families and our loved ones, whether we're, at work and, then we come home and it's like, what are we going to do? Are we going to sit down and play a game? Are we going to sit down and watch a movie? Are we going to go out and see a movie? Are we going to go see a play? Are we going to go to the theme park? There's all these different ways in which you can entertain yourself and enjoy those little, pieces of life. But when you stop when the craft becomes more about the industry and its survival than it does about entertaining the audience you're making the movie for, that's a point of contention.
Yeah.
And also, when you do make things that are solely for sucking the life out of time that I find precious, then I'm going to resort to methods of my own to figure out what is worth my time. And that's why it's like the same with reviews of games. It's like, I'm not going to go play a 60, 70, 80-hour game to find out if it's good or not. I'm going to get the general consensus from different review sites that I trust or that I weight in terms of what I think is more trustworthy than others. And then I'm going to take my own opinion in the matter. And if it's a genre I like or a story that I'm focused on, and say, all right, I'll give that a try. Or, no, this isn't worth my time. I don't have the time
to... That's not just the time investment, your money.
Yes,
I mean, when a game is $70 and you buy it just to find out that it's broken upon release, when you could have read a review that said, hey, maybe wait until this has been patched 2 or 3 times because right now it runs like shit. Yeah. That's the difference. That's a $70 difference in your life.
That's
it's not just the time.
No, absolutely, 100%. And especially with movie tickets, the way the prices have gone up, it's like... I hate to say it, but yeah, I mean, we subscribe to AMC stubs.
Yeah.
So it's nice that we have that ability to go and see basically a movie. We can get 3 movies per week, but we go see about a movie a week. And that's more than well above your average moviegoer.
Yeah.
Yet the thing is it used to be a spectacle and an experience to go to the theater. We've talked about it on the show countless times, but the greater the greater technology gets with having beautiful big screen TVs or even projectors or beautiful sound systems, it's like when you can mimic certain things in your own home and set it up to your own liking and spend the money there and then just rent a movie or watch it somehow and be just as immersed, you really have to have a reason to go to the theater and spend the kind of money you're gonna spend, especially if you're taking your wife and your kids and the whole family. It's like it's got to be a spectacle to get out and spend that kind of money. It's got to be an experience that's worth going and enjoying. And to me, it's like I'm going to absolutely take it with a grain of salt, every type of review score aggregate I can get my hands on, because I don't want to waste my time or money on things that I could have been better spent doing something else. So, look, Rotten Tomatoes, in so much as, is it perfect? Absolutely not. Is it rotten in the sense that it needs to tighten up these areas that are loose ends in terms of promoting these things? Absolutely, because just as much as you would say it's a cry, and you would cry foul and it's wrong to allow trolls on your website to bash a film and send it to the graveyard before it even releases, I would say, yes, it is just as wrong to then also prop up certain critical reviews and say that they somehow are more weighted and given more credo than certain audience members that have a better taste and a better heart, pulse on the population at large.
Well, we'd even mentioned that in the past, how they talk about, audience scores, like just review bombing to make the film bad, but how there's certain movies that if you go on there, and you can read reviews before the movie even comes out saying, this movie's amazing, this movie's great because of this diverse casting. It's like, is this a legitimate review? Did they actually watch the movie, or are they just propping it up because it supports the agenda they want?
Yeah,
exactly.
Because at that point, it's like, then that good score is no longer valid either.
That's right. Oh, and absolutely, that's on the other side of the critical spectrum.
That's the other end.
The supposed certified critics, where you're going to get that. You can read almost a paragraph into the review and know why they gave it a good score.
But you get it, like I said, you get an audience like scores too. Like where instead of review bombing, you have like a large, like I would say, minority of people that are vocal. They're like, well, we know people are going to hate on this movie because of this subject matter, so we're going to go.
You get the
prop
backlash.
it.
Yes.
So then they just go prop the movie up.
And again, that's where you have to take it with a grain of salt. I agree that maybe you can sit here and say that Rotten Tomatoes has become too mainstream, that it's become something that props up, or that the movie industry itself uses to prop up whether it's a good or a bad movie to promote their film. But again, you have to trust the audience member at the end of the day, whether it's good word of mouth or whether it's something that, again, to me, the funny thing is how much crap Netflix can push out on a consistent basis. And yet every once in a while, there's that Squid Games. There's Bird Box. There's movies that break the cultural norm that just go crazy on social media that immediately elicit a response from everybody to tune in.
Yeah.
And it somehow breaks through the cultural zeitgeist to get your attention. And yet, while some reviewers or critics will be out there trying to find out what that is, it's like, no, ultimately your job is to view the film, give it your honest opinion, and then it's up to the audience to read it and say whether it's valid or not. And that's up to me. That's how it is. That's what a review aggregate score is supposed to be about.
Yeah.
So with that being said, take with it what you will. You can continue to trust Rotten Tomatoes, or you can, exactly like we have on this show, not only criticize it in the past, but we've even had our own issues in terms of how Rotten Tomatoes has handled things like dealing with audience scores and how they do have a very basic approach to how they aggregate. I mean, why do you think we have our own reviews on this show? It's like, we have our own opinions. If you tune in and you like what we say and you happen to agree with our opinions, then I can guarantee you most of the time, if you go and look at our website and you find a review and you see what the review score is, you may say, well, I kind of tend to agree with these guys. I'll give this one a shot. I like what they said about it. Or you may say, nah, I won't waste my time. I don't agree with them at all. I hate them. So so be it. But that's what it's out there for. It's to give you your own, to give you our opinion, but you have your own informed opinion.
Yep.
Alrighty, guys. I think you did it beforehand. Supposed to do it after I run the open.
No, that was because you
That
said
was
that.
because of what you just
Yeah,
said.
you said I hate them. So
I said they could hate us.
yeah, well
They just did.
Oh,
They
yeah.
said they hate us.
Here's our multimedia segment.
Multimedia.
multimedia. That one comes after you run.
I tell you, you got to use more on that board.
Share the load.
There we go. I like that one.
Yeah.
The other ones I actually use when it's appropriate. Those two I just throw in there because it tickles me.
It does. Well, if it tickles you, I guess I can be happy with that.
Yeah.
Mainly because I know it annoys you. He's like, he regrets putting those on there.
I don't. I enjoy them, but man, they're just, it's like, I know they're coming every show.
As soon as he
Coming
moves his
every
hand,
show.
you're like, here it comes.
It's like, he's going for
Because the other ones are like actually legitimate, like good quotes from movies that I'm like, oh yeah, I love when he says that in that movie. Those two are just like, man, those lines are so terrible, so terribly delivered.
Well, what could be terribly delivered.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to do a segue.
Segue.
Yeah.
Chimpanzee riding on a Segway.
Great song. But no, should the days of DLC be behind us?
Should they be?
We were just talking about games, and we were talking about wasting time. And I just wanted to bring this up because we've talked about games and our affinity. I mean, we grew up with gaming culture and,
I'm a
seen
little
its growth.
on the fence about this. Mostly because I'm tired of the dumb, like, oh, pay this much money and you get these better guns or you get this aesthetic or you can unlock these characters.
Yeah.
I'm like, that stuff should just be in the game. I don't want to pay you $30 to unlock characters that I should be able to play and unlock, even though Brandon just did.
Those were worth it.
They were. Smash Bros. Anyway, but for me, like, I think some story content, depending on what it is, like if it feels like a fresh idea, like the Last of Us DLC, I can kind of understand, like, okay, it adds a little bit of extra content. It's not a full game's worth. But then at the same time, you could say, well, why not just develop that more and add it on? And add it on to the next thing, because that's what happened with Tears of the Kingdom. It initially started as Breath of the Wild DLC. They had so many great ideas. They were like, oh, we can make a full-fledged game with these new mechanics rather than DLC. And I'm like, maybe that's a better option, because it does get really annoying. You pay $70 for a game, and then they're just like, well, here's all this, but if you want to play these added features, and it's not something that they planned after the fact, like, oh, we have a great idea for a mechanic that we can sell as DLC. No, they sell you DLC packages when you buy the game. You go, and they're like, pay for the season pass so that you can get the DLC when it comes out. So you're already planning on making stuff that you could have just incorporated into the game.
More or less.
Yeah.
Okay, Sean, you.
No,
you look like
I
you
was
have
just simply going to say that I think that's, if you want to make money, that's how you do it. Like, I mean, it's like they make a movie. They already planned on making sequels to this movie. Like, they know that they're going to bank on another outing and another outing. And I feel like with some games, the DLC, like primarily multiplayer games, I feel like this is going to be a big multiplayer game for the next 3 to 5 years. So you pump out a $70 game, and then you've got 5 years worth of maps and new stuff. That's that's where that motto of the DLC, I can see it works. It brings in a $30 or $40 every year. It keeps people playing because the game would get old and stale without something new. So I get that. But then
it does show a support for a game.
Yeah. And I mean, well, that's a great example though. Destiny 2 is, God, how many years old is that game now?
Yeah, in that sense, I do understand.
And there's still freaking DLC coming out for it.
Because that's similar to like a World of Warcraft situation where it's like you're just expanding constantly upon the game.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I do kind of get it. I'm not so much opposed to that.
I remember that from like The Sims. On the PC, you'd have expansion packs.
And then you just buy the expansion pack rather than, which is basically what that type of DLC for Destiny kind of is. It's a new expansion pack.
Sometimes I understand. There's only so much you can pack into a $70 game. If they were going to take all that DLC and put it in there to begin with, it's a $200 game.
There's some that are like that.
Yeah.
Some that where the content's on the disc and it's not unlocked. And then you have to pay later
to unlock
or pay to unlock the things that are already included in the game.
I remember the controversy surrounding that.
Yeah.
It's like, if it's already on the disc, I paid for the disc. Give me the content.
Right.
That's why I said I was on the fence, because there are certain situations where I think DLC is not a bad thing or a bad idea. But then when you have like, the pay to win DLC where, well, if you want all the best gear, then you're going to have to give us more money.
I don't like that.
And I'm just like, no. Like, if I can't unlock it in the game, that's stupid.
No.
But then there's also instances where you have games that allow that, but then they also have ways you can earn it in the actual game. It just takes you a ridiculously long time.
You just got to grind for 2 years before you can,
I don't know. I'm on the fence as well. To me, it's a per case by case basis. Yeah. As a whole, I think it should be behind us because I think I don't want to say it's not like it isn't giving new life to a product that may be at the end of its life. I think for certain cases, it's definitely true, like Destiny. It's more warranted because that's a value-added proposition that you're going into in the interim. Like, as soon as you buy that game, you know it's going to be supported for years on end. They've told you.
Yeah.
But then it's weird because then there's other games that are completely like came out, got review bombed, rightfully so, because it was lackluster in what they presented originally, but then has had update after update after update and free content and like No Man's Sky. And it's like, it's after the somewhat Bethesda, I don't want to say it was a debacle. It's been successful in terms of people playing Starfield, but after it came out and it was lo and behold, another Bethesda game with a lot of glitches and a lot of things that are not tidied up. And yet you've had No Man's Sky that came out and was, again, less than what it was promised. And yet they have just completely changed that game to where it is nothing like it was when it came out. And you pay the same low price that they cut it down to, I think, 3 or 4 years ago. And the fact that it's like 5 years old at this point, and yet you could play it on current consoles with all this extra added content with literally dozens of hours of playtime. And you're not paying any extra for it. Like there's just times where I'm like, is that a developer like that is receiving money? Like, to me, there's no way. It's not like these graphic houses that get bought up by production studios or movie studios, and then they have to do the CGI for a given movie, and then next thing you know, they're going bankrupt because they just spent below the load on everything, pouring it into that one movie. But it's funny because I'm like, well, I guess No Man's Sky has their developer studio has to be doing financially okay for them to have continued to live off of this game for that long, whether it's getting new players into the experience. But all these update packs have been like for free. Yeah. And I even think about it in terms of the software world when it comes to Final Cut Pro 10 has been the same price for literally 10 years now at this point. And they've done nothing but you bought it one time and they just do updates. Then you have DaVinci Resolve. It's in that. And that to me puts something like Adobe Premiere to shame when it's not only a subscription model, but then they're not any better and they've not gotten, the fidelity of their service has not improved.
You're paying Adobe annually, but you're not getting anything better than what this other company's giving you for free.
Free. Yeah. And so I'm in the boat of like, take Smash Brothers, for instance. Yes, I bought an extra character pack simply because it had 2 characters in it that I really wanted. But I was kind of amazed at, based on what I paid for that, to know that it was developed after the game that had originally come out. Those were not included. And then the way they were incorporated into the game after I bought the DLC and the finesse that they put into the level of detail with the character design, the way you interact with them and play with them, the way the stages look, and it made it worthwhile. And to me, that's something where I'm like, if you're going out of your way to not only create something for the fans, but you're creating something new that gives a whole new experience to a game that you're already enjoying playing, I think those types of DLC are worth it. Even when it comes to like map packs and the occasional new weapon you get in a Call of Duty game, I'm like, no, it doesn't add any new gameplay feature. It literally is just a different skin on a different environment. And yeah, I know some people would argue and say, well, that's new content. Yeah, but is it of the same value? I would argue differently. I don't think it is.
I agree. I'm kind of thinking of The Witcher 3.
Yeah.
That game took years for Project Red or CD Project Red.
Yeah.
To make that game. So between that game and the next one that they were working on, which was Cyberpunk, they came out with DLCs for The Witcher. Now, The Witcher's story is told. It has an ending in The Witcher 3, but the DLC just adds story, it adds locations, it adds these things. But I kind of feel like it's like, if you spent 10 years making this game, I don't expect you to make all of this stuff available on day one. It's like, if it's going to take you 10 more years to make the next game, and you've got another crew that's just, well, we want to keep people playing The Witcher. We spent 10 years on it. We want people to play it for more than just the 20 hours it takes to beat it. So we're going to have another team making this new content for it to keep it interesting and keep our company's name in people's minds, so that when Cyberpunk comes out, they know who we are. Even though Cyberpunk was a botched release, that's another company that's been making it right since its release. And its first DLC for Cyberpunk they're saying the DLC is larger than has a larger file size than the base game. Like, it's a bigger game of DLC than you originally purchased. So that's the kind of DLC that I can get behind. If you put a bunch of time into the game and you gave me this great game and you want to just continue and further that story and give me something to play until your next great game, that's fine. When it's a Call of Duty, a game that comes out every year,
Yeah.
and you've already got an entire year's worth of DLC planned at the beginning,
Yes.
then that's when I feel like Keith, when I'm like, well, you could have just released all of that at once,
Yep.
and we would have played it for a year until your next game.
Yes.
But instead, you wanted to penny and,
Yeah,
mean you
nickel
don't-
and dime
nickel and
ya.
dime you
Yep.
for every little thing.
You don't want to pay for that Nicki Minaj operator bundle so you
Oh
can
my
run around.
God.
I didn't even know there was.
Yeah, her and Snoop
There,
Dogg.
I know that
you can run around as Snoop Dogg or Nicki Minaj.
I'm trying to think what game. There's like
Talk about
some
sellouts,
game where there's
man.
going to be a John Wick where you can.
Oh, I'm sure,
I
yeah.
can't remember what game. Oh,
Is it Fortnite? I think he's been on Fortnite.
it might have been.
It'd
Fortnite.
be awesome if he was in Mortal Kombat.
I think it's Mortal Kombat 1.
That would be
the new one. I
amazing.
think
That would be
there's going to be
awesome,
something
yeah.
where you can
That would be
unlock
legit.
John Wick.
They always have special. And actually, Mortal Kombat's a game where I do kind of understand it. It's like you have these action or horror icons that kind of fit with the graphic nature of the fighting game. That's kind of fun to play as. But who the heck asked to be Nicki Minaj running around Call of Duty?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Other than now, people are doing it because it's ironically funny. Like when they kill you, they can teabag you as Nicki Minaj, and it looks like she's twerking over you. So I mean, and it's like, yeah, people are gonna play it now because they're like, it's stupid. So let's buy it.
I
So,
got
yeah.
I got 2,400 COD points right now.
You might
You're about
do
to
it.
go to Nicki Minaj.
But that's the thing. It's like it's not popular because people thought it was actually a good idea. It's because people
But
are
it
like, oh, this
is.
is it's popular
Yeah,
because it's
yeah.
funny. It's like,
and
yeah.
that's exactly, if anything,
and that's what they're hoping for. Yeah.
They know their fan base well enough to know that it's the like you said, Sean, they're bought in from day one.
Yeah.
It's like they know what they're gonna do. They
Yeah.
do the season pass for a reason, and I agree. To me, it's disingenuous. I stopped a long time ago. I get why people still do it, but it is interesting that it's like, yeah, I agree. There's two different ways to approach the idea, which is if you're going to create a massive amount of content that is able to be given to me in such a way that it's like, all right, this is adding new story elements. This is adding new level of depth. I mean, the Left Behind is a good example. When it came out, I was like, okay, I wanted to know more about that world. Recently, it was announced that FF16 is getting DLC. And they even said, they were like, we planned, because the way FF15 was rolled out, it was botched. We had all these plans for this grand, huge universe that we were planning things for. People didn't buy into it. The DLC came out, and yeah, there were some people who enjoyed that content, but they felt like we intentionally set out to deceive our customer base because we had planned that from the get-go. He said, so we made FF16 into a singular focused story from start to finish, that when you bought this game, it was a self-contained story and full game from start to finish, which I immediately was like, 100%, that's why I bought into it.
Yeah.
And he said, after months of it being on the market and people loving the world, having beaten the game, they want more of this. We were going to move on to the next Final Fantasy. We're willing to create DLC for it that fits within that realm. And I'm like, that to me is where it's a worthy, kind of like what you said even with The Witcher. When there's things that come up after the initial sell of the game where they're like, we want to keep you invested in this experience.
Or we want to give you a new experience. We want to give you a new story.
And especially if there is that other project on the horizon. But look, we all know production budgets on games has ballooned. And granted, they make more money than the movie industry right now. They're a huge, booming business in entertainment. And it's interesting that we know now, because the worlds have become so lush and beautiful and huge to explore, it does take more man hours. It does take longer production cycles. And so we're not getting games pumped out every year or 2 years, except for your milquetoast Call of Duties. But the bigger games that we are expecting to see from certain companies in 3 to 4 years' time, we not only want it to be worth our hard-earned money, but we also may not want to wait until the next 3 or 4 years from that team. Then again, I would also argue differently in terms of somewhere like this year is a perfect example of, I don't want DLC because there's already too much to play. It's like, I don't need more content. There's already way too much out there, whether it's RE4, Tears of the Kingdom, FF16, Spider-Man 2 coming out, or Jedi Survivor. Now people, I'm not into them, but Baldur's Gate 3 and Starfield. It's like, these are massive open world games that take years to develop, and then when they launch, you want people to get in and explore and see everything the world has to offer. But at the same time, it's also like they're either spending their time doing that, and they and then other games get passed up, or it's the DLC comes out and it's like, I'm not going to spend my time with that anymore. I'm done with that game. I'm moving on to the next one.
Yeah.
And I actually appreciate, I think, DLC. I mean, it depends, because I mean, I loved Breath of the Wild's DLC. I think it added some fun stuff. But generally, I like the DLC for the non-open world games more, because that is giving you more content that wasn't there. Whereas, like,
It's more story-centric,
like,
mostly.
not everything. I feel like there's a rumor now that the next Gears of War they're developing is going to be open world. It's like Halo didn't need to be open world. Gears of War doesn't need to be open world. It's like, it's too, like, there's no reason to have this massive endless field that's not going to have crap in it to explore anyways, because it's a shooter.
Well, that's why a lot of people have
yeah.
been giving praise to games like Jedi Survivor or even God of War. And I would argue that God of War, the 2018 one, when it relaunched, it kind of perfected it in terms of you got this hub world.
Yes.
You've got a massive, smaller open world here in this hub
That you
where
can
you
explore.
constantly come back to, and there's new things that are open and unlocked as
Yeah.
you progress. But then there's these other more linear experiences and offshoots, but it still all feels connected and integrated.
Yes.
And to me, I prefer that more so than, like you said, the huge I'm okay to dive into that world every once in a while. I'm looking forward to Spider-Man 2 because it's like that.
Yeah.
But it's still on an island. It's still to a certain degree smaller. But it's also, what do you fill that world with that it doesn't feel empty or desolate? Yet also at the same time, there's certain DLC that I'm just like, I don't want to, even for games that I enjoy and that I want to play. There's sometimes where I feel like, okay, I was part of the reason this discussion came up was because I was glad to hear that they said they weren't doing Tears of the Kingdom DLC.
yeah.
They were ing on to the next
game.
mainline,
Yeah.
Zelda game, and I'm like, I appreciate that because that's them saying we know there's more than enough for you to dive in
It's like
and
twice
indulge.
as big as Breath
And
of
it's
the
like,
Wild.
of course you're going to have consumers who just eat up every bit of Tears of the Kingdom, explore every bit of it. There's probably some that have already gotten to that point of having done everything in the game.
And they want more still.
And they
Some of
want
them,
more.
yeah.
But you know what? Your average and majority consumer that's going to buy it and play it here and there, I think you even said, Keith, the first Breath of the Wild, it took you like 2 years before you really got your fill. Till you were done.
And I mean, I didn't play it every day, but
No.
it was one that I revisit because
but that's the thing. You let it incubate.
that's what. Yes, I did. I incubated. But and that's what I love about open world games. And I mean, and there's only certain ones I get into because I don't hate open world games. I just not everything needs to be one like Gears of War. But like Skyrim, Breath of the Wild, the Grand Theft Auto games, like I like ones that. Yeah, you can go through and beat the story fairly quick, but there's still enough to do that I could spend a couple years going back because you do get your money's worth. Like, you pay $70 for a game,
Yes.
but it has enough content that you can keep revisiting side missions and different aspects and go run around exploring things. And it's like, yeah, it gives you like plenty to do, and I appreciate that. But not everything needs to be that. And when you are so massive, you also don't need, like, Breath of the Wild's DLC was fine. Tears of the Kingdom was twice as big. I said, like, I don't feel like it really needs the DLC.
Yeah,
I'm
no.
fine. I still haven't scratched halfway through getting through
Same.
that game. So it's
Nowhere
one of those
near.
things where it's like, it's been out for almost a year now, and it's going to be another year before I probably complete everything in it, just like Breath of the Wild was.
Yeah, I agree. Ultimately, yeah, it's again, it's debatable as to whether or not you're for. I think in certain cases it's warranted, in others it's definitely a cash grab. Overall, I've got way too much on my plate that I can thoroughly enjoy. It's kind of like I'm with you. It's like I'm gonna take bites and little chunks here
It's
and
like
there.
Thanksgiving dinner. You just get you a little bit of
Get there, a
everything.
smorgasbord of stuff. Yummy. But no, we did have one email. We're gonna hold off. We're gonna answer it next week. Nathan, I'm sorry, bud.
It's a little late.
It's a little late. We got to wrap things up here. We do have his email from last week. He actually sent it right after the show.
Okay.
So
we got Jacob's right at the end of the show.
We did,
and we
but-
still said we might discuss that a little bit further at some point.
Yeah, we may. Maybe we
have
will
to
in
really
the future.
think about that.
But
though.
yeah, so Nathan, if you're tuning in, we're gonna get to it. Don't worry, we're gonna answer your email on next week's show. Tease. Alrighty, guys, thank you all so much for tuning in. As always, like, share, subscribe on all of our social networks right there. Facebook, Red Moon Book on Twitter, or X, Red Moon Tweet, Red Moon Pics on Instagram, and of course search for Red Moon Productions on both YouTube and Rumble. Like, share, subscribe. Appreciate all the love that you give us there. And there is that old-fashioned way, just like we alluded to with Nathan's email, we're going to read them live on air.
Live.
Just sometimes when we don't go over. What is that email address there, Keith?
RMPodcast at redmoonproductions.com.
Just beautiful.
Sexy.
Just so sexy. I love it. Alrighty, guys, that's it for this week's episode. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Until next time, I'm one of your hosts, Brandon Davidson, alongside our normal new host,
Sean Sebastian.
and
Crud.
Crud. I was hoping you'd remember.
We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. For more reviews, previous podcast shows, and everything Red Moon, visit our website, redmoonproductions.com. You can also like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter by searching for Red Moon Productions, LLC. We'll see you at the movies.